Like our first lecture in this module, I plan on trying to talk about general trends. As we go through some of these elements in a little bit more detail in our next few lectures, hopefully some of these trends will be made clearer, but I want to start with sort of the broad principles, and then we can delve down into the specifics. And in fact, what you should do, and maybe by the end of them you want to re-watch these lectures, you should see sort of lecture 9.1 through 9.4 as part of an integrated whole. All of these changes, demography, economics, technology, arts, and philosophy, all of these things are happening concurrently, happening at the same time. And so if it's helpful, try and get all of these things in your head, because all of these ideas are churning around and everything else, and then they're eventually going to spill out in terms of the imperial project in Asia and Africa, our last lecture of this module. But again, wanted to start with the general trends. And so what are they? The first is a solidification of a new theory of economics. Again, the shift away from mercantilism towards a new principle of capitalism. Again, we've discussed this in some detail. Suggest looking at the Lightboard module for sort of some more specifics on that shift from mercantilism to capitalism. And so the rest of this lecture I'm going to talk about the two broader trends, because I think hopefully capitalism has been well explained there in terms of how we have a shift to a new economic mode of thought, a new system of economics. And so how does capitalism play out in imperial possessions and the development known as the Second Industrial Revolution? So capitalism, if you will, plays an important role in terms of talking about imperialism because it provides a new motive. What I mean by that is in Africa and in Asia prior to this point, Europeans were concerned with acquiring trade goods. They wanted wealth. They wanted markets for their goods. They wanted to acquire trade goods or certain products. But conquest of territory was something that was not critical. It's not that it wasn't important. It's not that it was less of a concern. It's not even that there weren't some practical reasons why there wasn't a conquest. But it's helpful to realize that there is a shift under capitalism towards a new desire and a new drive. Namely that in Asia, in Africa, Europeans wanted to take over the territory because they were no longer content to just have trade. What they wanted to do was, if you will, quote unquote, develop these areas. And in this you should see an attitude of capitalism at play. Namely, capitalism, the Industrial Revolution, is all about efficiency, improvement, increasing productivity. And one of the attitudes of Europeans at this time is, well, if we take over this territory, won't we do a much better job than those indigenous people in making this territory work, making it economically productive? And so this fixation on trying to extract as much as they can out of this territory is leading to a new motive force, if you will, in developing these regions of the world. The other major development is, as I termed, the Second Industrial Revolution. Now, we've already discussed the First Industrial Revolution. Broadly, it occurs from 1740 to the 1850s, starting in England, as we talked about, and then by the 1850s spreading to the continent and outwards from there. The operating power of it was steam. If you remember, we talked about James Watt and his more efficient steam engine. It helped produce new material, iron, which becomes wedded to the steam engine and helps create the railway, that new form of transportation. It transformed the textile industry first, but then that factory system starts to be used in all areas of production. So again, that's broadly that first industrial revolution. I'm breaking it apart like that to help you see the differences when we talk about this new period that historians refer to as the Second Industrial Revolution. Because the Second Industrial Revolution occurs from the 1850s till roughly the 1950s. I've tried to list here the same sort of breakdown. Rather than being powered by steam, you get a shift to being powered by electricity. Rather than iron being one of the primary building materials produced by this, you get a shift towards steel. And if the textile industry was transformed by steam power, well, electricity helps drive forward a new industry, the chemical industry. Now, I'm going to trace through some of these changes in more detail, but just highlighting one to help you think through the effects of this. If you remember, in terms of going back, steam power was driven by coal. And so what this means is wherever you could get coal to your factory, you could set up a factory and make it run and make it productive again. That was part of breaking free of the shackles of nature. You don't have to rely on human power, you don't have to rely on water power, you don't have to be near a river, et cetera, et cetera. Well, now that you're under the power of electricity, well, now you don't even need to be near a train station. You don't need to have a railway that will deliver carloads of coal to your factory to keep it running. Now all you need is, well, the wires to reach you. And so what you should think about is that electricity transforms the Industrial Revolution insofar as now you can take your factory and put it wherever you can reach it with an electrical current. So what you should see in this is the second Industrial Revolution is going to really take off and produce the type of changes that we think of as, again, normal, that elements of how people work, how industries work, and everything else. But what you should see in this is an acceleration of those changes wrought by the first Industrial Revolution, carried forward largely by this new power source, electricity.